So I shall invite Councillor Jones to lead off.
Thank you, and thank you for the extra time. There is a copy of the track changes that I sent to everyone that wasn't tracked actually, and as I said, my apologies for that. So that's coming to you shortly. Kirsty's just printing that out upstairs. So questions. I just wanted to ask staff, please, to comment on recent comments. From the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, Dr. Jan Wright, who has commented on the government's policy on air pollution, which obviously informs the national environmental standards, saying that concentrating on reducing high pollution days was wrong. She says that in her analysis of the 2014 Air Domain report, the World Health Organization guidelines should be adopted. I'd be keen on your comments on that, please.
Can I first take the opportunity to introduce to you Janine Keller, an environmental planner who works here at the City Council, and Brent Pizzey, who you're most probably well acquainted with, one of our legal advisors for this air plan submission. In response to your question or your comment, it's important to understand that the measurement of particle matter of the 2.5 in particular is part of the measurement of all particulates from 10 being a coarser fragment down, coarser size down to the finer 2.5. And it is right that the council, or sorry, ECAN they do monitor for that, but their monitoring is restricted to 2 stations or to 2 monitoring areas in Christchurch, and that there is always the opportunity to do more monitoring, to have more detailed information. And just recently, ECAN have agreed to do more detailed monitoring in Littleton as part of trying to better understand the PM 2.5 from diesel emissions. We, as council staff, we're not air quality scientists, and we're not in a good position to be able to comment on necessarily on the methodology or the approach that ECAN has used to be able to determine the nature of the monitoring that they do. But we are generally satisfied that the approach that they use, that I've used or that they use is robust enough to help determine the provisions, or for the drafting of the provisions that they've got in the air plan.
Can I clarify that, because it could be just me. The logic is lost on me there. Appreciate that you're not scientists. However, how can you be confident of the robustness of the methodology and other information supplied by ECAN if you're unable to analyse it for that robustness? I can't follow that.
I think the only comment I can make to that is that as part of the development of the proposed plan, ECAN has worked closely across the region with a lot of the district, all the districts, and as well as that, they have carried out extensive consultation and engagement with this council through presentations to the IT&E committee, as well as to our board members and board chairs. So we have accepted, well, we're not in a position other than to accept the methodology that they've used, and we've done that on the understanding that to achieve the standards that have been set for Christchurch, that this is a method, that this approach will achieve those objectives in terms of the reduced number of high pollution nights in Christchurch.
Just continue with the main points that are at the top of the submission, and perhaps we could just talk to those so that, would that be acceptable?
That's fine.
Right, so if we could just start with I think they're on the copy in front of you, and everyone else should be getting it shortly. Oh no, it's in your agenda, isn't it? Yeah, great. So just talk us through why they're here and why they've been. These are the general comments at the top of the submission.
Okay, thank you. The first comment, as I was alluding to, we've worked closely with ECAN over the last 12 to 18 months. This is at both the staff level and through the presentations by Commissioner Bedford and his staff to the council. Overall, the plan, we feel it's a well structured plan for a regional plan. Sometimes they're difficult to understand, but this is a particularly clearly written plan. And on the basis of that, we're confident that the plan provisions will help to achieve those standards which have been set for ECAN to achieve. We support the overall intent of the plan, and just by way of background, the council has previously commented on the plan structure and what it was to achieve, so we put in a submission on that, or in fact it was a comment rather than a submission, and also we commented on the pre-notified draft of the submission, which generally the council supported the position that ECAN was taking. Just a comment, and in relation to Councillor Jones' track changes here, under 2 there, vehicle emissions, the inclusion of that we don't agree with, because ECAN is unable to deal with vehicle emissions through the air plan, and that is clearly explained in the introductory chapter of the air plan. On point 3 there, those additions, we would be happy to include those, so we think that is a useful change to the general comment number 3. Over the page, or over my page, point number 5, I'm just going to get Janine to talk a little bit more about that. This relates to the deadlines that ECAN have set for the use for the installation of ultra-low emission wood burners. So I'll just hand over to Janine at this stage.
The NES national regulations set the time frame by which the different levels have to be met. ECAN must meet them, and they cannot be more. They cannot set standards that are more lenient than those standards that are in the national environment standards. So, in terms of when the deadlines are met, ECAN actually doesn't have any ability to change the end point. All they have is the ability to change the way, to determine the way that they meet those standards. So, the rules that they've set in the plan are their description of how they feel that they can meet the deadline that they're required to meet. So that sort of gives an idea that they can't extend it. However, if that is not to say that the manner that they have tried to manage to meet that standard is necessarily correct. There may be other options that they could do to meet those standards within that set time frame by totally get rid of wood burners. I mean, and not allow any. That might, I don't know, because you'd have to do all the scientific stuff and behind it to determine what that would actually mean. Would you achieve it based on that? But the mechanism, they could change that, and if the council felt that there were different ways that they could do it, they might be able to put a submission in that says, we think you could do it this way. And in saying that, looking at the Section 32 report that looks at those particular rules and how they've managed it, they have looked at the option of doing nothing, which obviously they will totally miss the national standards. They have looked at what the standards are in the operative air plan, which basically bans wood burners full stop. So there will be no ultra-low emission, no low emission by, I think it was by 2020. But they actually still won't meet the standards according to their Section 32. They still will not be able to meet the deadline set by the National Environment Standards. The option that they've put in the rules in dealing with wood burners and the ultra-low, bringing in the ultra-low emission burners, and the time frame for getting rid of the low emission burners, their conclusion is that they will meet the standards set by the National Environment Standard Equality. So they have, to an extent, gone through that process and saying, if we do this, are we going to meet the standards? And they think they will. Whether there's another method of divvying things up, I don't know. And again, you would need to have air quality scientists. That would require quite a lot of research to go back and look at the various different options that you might be able to use to see whether that could be actually
Can
met.
I ask around the options available, and it sounds like there aren't any with regards to extending deadlines, and I know you mentioned you cannot be more lenient, and I've heard that often and I understand that. However, there was some discretion applied from memory after the earthquakes, wasn't there? Weren't the deadlines altered slightly to enable people to use fires and wood burners because houses were still damaged and cold? I seem to recall
They just didn't enforce the
They
standard.
didn't, okay,
they didn't
thank you.
enforce it.
Yep.
So they didn't prosecute people for using their wood burner.
Right, so is that something that we could consider with regards to...
I think it's already in the submission, isn't it?
Yes.
A comment along those lines.
Yeah.
That it's a good idea for ECAN to, in some circumstances, use that enforcement discretion.
Yep, Pauline.
When you're talking about achieving the standards, are you talking about the achieving no more than 3 high pollution days per year?
It's basically the standard, the PM10 standards.
Yep.
And there's within the NES standards themselves, they have a table that is based on, it gives a time frame by which you have to achieve that standard, depending on whether you're in an environment that isn't very polluted or whether you're in an airshed, and it sets standards within that, breaks it down when you have to meet particular standards. And they have to be as least as stringent as those standards set. How they do it is up to them, but they've got to meet the standards.
And ECAN wants to meet those by 2016.
I'm sorry?
ECAN wants to meet that by 2016.
No, those are...
The 3...
That's part of the excuse me, I'll just have to find the...
I think there might be a comment that ECAN have got some choice in this matter, but they don't. They're covered by national environmental standards.
Yes. That's fine.
Basically, for example, I'm going to make the assumption that there's more than 10 or more exceedances per year, which in Christchurch probably is reasonable to assume. By the 1st of September 2011 to the 31st of August 2016, that is the period which exceedances are allowed. The number of exceedances is unlimited. By 2016 to 2020, they're only allowed to have 3 or fewer periods in a 12-hour, and by 2020, they're only allowed 1 or fewer in a 12-month period. So they've staggered it, but we have to meet each of those deadlines.
The Deputy Mayor asked what's the consequences of failure to meet the standard.
It's probably illegal.
What's that? Yeah. There might be commissioners appointed. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there's no penalty under the Resource Management Act that applies to a regional council that doesn't comply with national standards. There's simply a statutory requirement, and councils, yes,
They're obliged to deliver on it. Yep.
that's right.
I mean, look, I understand what the issue's about, but I haven't participated in any of this, and I promise not to. But you know, having been the MP for an area that was pretty hard hit during the earthquake, we met with the commissioners on several occasions over the issue of people having to rebuild and not being able to replace with the wood burner that they had before. And, you know, it is very hard. But from another point of view, the houses that are being rebuilt are far more energy efficient than the ones that they're replacing. And you know, but I understand why people felt that you need a degree of comfort around access to something that doesn't require electricity, having been myself without electricity for more than 2 weeks. Glenn, and then
Councillor Jones and I were outvoted on this, and I'm pretty okay with that. That's just how it goes. But I guess one of the angles we were coming from is with these issues and the unresolved insurance claims leading to the fact that people are living in homes where the cladding is compromised, the wind's whistling through. So we're just pushing for a bit of, you know, just some flexibility, some leniency. Maybe we need to...
But that's what we've said in the submission.
Yeah.
We've
well,
said,
I guess I just wanted to make that explicit too. And
whereabouts is... Can you direct us to that?
Section paragraph 3.
What page?
The first page, the front page.
Oh. Oh, sorry. Supports the leniency program. But I thought they'd stopped it.
I think they've reduced the scope of it to some extent. Right. So I think there's the opportunity there that they, and I think they've heard this message about extending it, where they've made, and they have made genuine attempts, or more than attempts, they have genuinely helped people in those situations where there are financial constraints.
But it's not just financial. It's the point is that if your house is still not being rebuilt or being repaired, then you are not in a position to protect yourself against using the burner.
Yep.
But at what stage do you have to replace the current ones? 2016.
You can use the low emitting wood burners for up to 15 years or until 2019.
Right. Yep. I did know that.
Yep.
Yanni, sorry. Oh, sorry. Tim was first, and then Yanni, and then David.
I was told 2 days ago by EQC, I think they've got another 5,000 homes, or they've got 5,000 homes still in their books to either repair or rebuild or somewhere along those lines. So these will be affected by this, won't they? So,
yes, they will be. Yes, they will be. Yep.
A couple of other things. 2 days ago when I was talking to these guys, they'd been in a house a week earlier where their landlord was an extremely good landlord. They had a heat pump installed, but the tenants wouldn't use the heat pump because they couldn't afford the power. So here we are as a council looking at providing affordable housing for people who could not afford to run the heating. And I take the Mayor's point that the new houses and new builds are a lot better and they will be far more efficient with regards to retaining heat. But they also, when those houses are sealed, we get health problems from people using gas heaters with the humidity, etc., in those houses. So I think we really do need to push the leniency side, because in point 3 here on page 75, we're also saying that we're looking at $14,000 to $16,000 to install these new low emission burners. How many people can actually afford that? And then we're just pushing the debt somewhere else because we're going to assist these people with or try to assist them with no interest or low interest loans, but it is still a financial burden on these families. It's just, where's the it's amazing.
Well, I would have to say that these installations didn't exist before the rule was created, and sometimes the market will take a little bit longer to catch up, which is why I support the subsidy approach. But it isn't, I mean, none of this is easy because, you know, the truth is that the air quality requirements are the air quality requirements, and they have health effects too. So, you know, individual health effects that we can mitigate in other ways, and population health effects that we can't mitigate if we don't address air quality. So that's the issue. Yanni.
I mean, a telling report in the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, a telling point in her report is that you could comply with the PM10 rule while increasing particulate pollution, because you could have a year with 2 days at 51 as a fail, but then have a year with no days over 50 and 20 days at 49, which would be considered a pass. So it's really obvious to me that the system is fundamentally flawed. And I don't think we're going to spend a lot of, I don't think we're going to make a lot of progress having a big debate as a council today about what goes in our submission. I personally think, and would welcome the feedback from staff, whether this is something we should put in the submission, that we should be saying to ECAN, we're happy to work with them to approach government to change the NES and to get better reporting and monitoring and assessment standards in place that more adequately reflect what the WHO and the the Commissioner of the Environment are saying. Because otherwise we're going to go ban a whole bunch of fires, wood burners, and if you looked at St Albans compared to Australia, it would be rated as having good air quality, and compared to the Australian scale, it would be fine, but we're actually penalising a community not to be able to use wood burners on some logic that seems to be, by all the best evidence I can see, well out of date and not effective in controlling the issue. So is that something we could put in the submission? That, I mean, it's not in the scope of their air plan, but it should be a point where they can lobby or advocate to central government.
Can I suggest that if the council wishes to have that discussion with ECAN, that it happen outside of the submission?
Yeah,
because
I
the
agree.
submission is about the appropriate content of their proposed air plan,
Which they're required to do by law.
in the legal framework that they've got.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is a discussion about what the appropriate legal framework should be, because you're talking about changes to the National Environmental Standard. Now, that's a discussion that needs to be had with central government, and what we don't know, either at an officer or a council level at this stage, is what would be the actual effect for our community in terms of cost of resources or cost of implementation if there was to be this change in the National Environmental Standard to a focus on PM 2.5 rather than PM 10. So it's something that we do know on the basis of the evidence available in the ECAN Section 32 report is that wood burners in homes putting out PM 10, something like 80% of that PM 10 is 2.5. That's what they've said in their background documents. So if you've got a framework that's limiting the PM 10, you are still limiting the 2.5, but not to the extent that the World Health Organisation or the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment recommend. So that discussion...
So there may in fact have to be further extension to the limits.
Well yes, we don't know. I don't know what those further regulatory constraints would need to be or what they're going to cost.
Right.
In order to meet those recommendations.
Look,
for the
can we take that issue offline then and get some work done on that so that we can decide whether we raise that with ECAN, but not as part of the submission process?
The point that I think needs to be made in the submission is that using the current standards doesn't give you an accurate indication of the air quality impact on health.
But this is the standard that they are applying, that they legally have to operate their air plan under. So let us put in a submission that deals with the issues that we should be submitting on. The separate issue is the question of the standard itself, and that is something that I would like to see some advice on before I mean, I haven't read the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment. And as I've said, I wasn't going to participate in this debate, so I've been very naughty so far. So how do you want to handle this, Ali? Do you want to deal with the... David and then Phil.
Yeah, look, my comments were probably along the lines of what we've been discussing, and I think it's a very good idea that we look at the ongoing National Environment Standard, because Christchurch has a temperature inversion regime, and the telling thing for me is that I don't think under the current regime or any regime that we will ever get to 1 day by 2021. So we are basically setting ourselves up to fail, because the standard doesn't reflect the environmental topographical conditions that exist in Christchurch, and you will never achieve it. So I support previous speakers in the desire to look at that further, but we are being asked to make a submission on the basis of an environmental standard that exists, and we're doing it. But the reality for me is that we're never going to actually achieve the required measure under the current standard.
Phil?
Well, look, I just want to ask a question, and especially for those councillors who weren't on the submissions panel, and it's of the staff really in relation to the health studies that have been done, and it's right at the front of the the Air Regional Plan, just in terms of the numbers of the impacts on health. If you might just run that past us for those who haven't got a copy of that, because those, for example, who die prematurely, cardiac hospital admissions and respiratory admissions. If you could just run that past us, I think that could be useful.
This is in the introduction section. Yes, okay. It's estimated in Canterbury each year that there are following health impacts from PM10. That's 435 adults of the age 30 plus die prematurely, 72 cardiac hospital admissions, and 108 respiratory hospital admissions. So, as is stated here, it's clear that improving air quality could reduce the number of premature deaths caused by the exposure to poor quality air.
Paul?
Just a couple of things. First is that we have actually improved the air quality since we've stopped coal burners and open fires, and so the reduction of even further, high emitting burners is going to improve health. Would that be correct?
Absolutely.
The second thing is that some of this debate's around actually affordability, and it would be nice to see actually something in here that actually talked about how much it costs to run a heat pump and how much it costs to buy wood, even if it is low burner or ultra low burner. How much it costs to buy wood pellets, because I understand they have all gone up in cost to quite a considerable degree, and some of the arguments around about I get free wood, but not everybody gets free wood. So it would have been good to see as part of this the affordability study of the various heating options, because I've run all those various options, and to me the heat pump certainly is quite affordable if you run them properly. But it would have been good to, as part of this, to have a bit of some information that could have supported some of this debate that we're having here today.
Except that's not the Canterbury Air Regional Plan. That's the other issues that we should be advising people on, in terms of the options. So, Glenn?
Thank you. Thank you for that information, Peter. Just referred to before. Can you tell me whether that data indicates that that is the sole cause of those statistics, those deaths?
It's not entirely clear in the introduction as to whether that is the sole cause. The sole cause. Yeah. Certainly it reads as though that's a significant contributing factor. There are a number of studies that have been done and reports which I have been sent on to Councillor Jones and Councillor Clearwater as well around some of the health effects and some of those the premature death numbers as well.
Sure, you can die quite well without those.
So, can I?
There is, sorry, that was a bit facetious. My comment here is that it seems to be that the Commission is a court. They have to uphold this standard, but it's a BAU standard for the rest of the country, and this is not BAU for some big parts of Christchurch. So
Well, no, people affected by the air quality hasn't changed at all. What's changed is the people having issues around heating their homes. So they're two separate issues, and one can be mitigated on a household basis, and the other one can't be mitigated except on a rules basis for the population. I mean, that's the issue. It's a trade-off between one or the other, but the Environment Canterbury cannot change the national environmental standard that they're applying. But, Ali, do you want...
I don't agree with you on that, and I don't agree with you on that because I think that the data on which we are basing some of these stats is flawed in the methodology, and it is also very old. I draw your attention to number 6 on the submission. For example, at present there are no national guidelines for PM 2.5, although it is increasingly recognised as a significant health issue. It appears in Christchurch, particularly during the winter. The main source is wood combustion, 92%, and that is related to 2001 and 2002 figures. Now, we may have some stats related to hospital admissions, and I concur with my colleague Glenn Livingston with regards to actually substantiating the breakdown of those admissions and what the causes of those illnesses and deaths. But we do not have stats related to hospital admissions and GP visits for cold and damp and bronchial illnesses resulting from those cold and damp homes. I do not understand how we can be using stats related to possible death and illness related to PM10 when we don't have stats to actually look at what's causing illness and misery for people and death because of cold, damp houses.
But 6 isn't referring to PM10.